DevilNeverCry.
Like Atlas shouldering the weight of the world, DevilNeverCry 5 is a game that carried with it the hopes and dreams of a fan base that had been waiting over a decade for a true sequel. And in this video, we're going to be beating DMC5 start to finish and getting our money back. For the unaware and uninitiated, here's how things are going to go down. Steam as a platform has a very specific refund policy that allows you to, without question, obtain a refund for a video game, provided it meets two specific requirements. The first requirement is that the refund request must come within 14 days of purchasing said product, which for this video doesn't matter all too much. The second requirement requires you to have less than 2 hours total playtime on the game you're trying to get a refund for. And that right there outlines everything quite neatly. We'll have to beat DMC5 in under 2 hours if we want to obtain our refund. Taking a look at the DMC5 speedrunning leaderboard, beating it in under 2 hours is definitely feasible. That is, of course, provided you are an experienced runner of DMC5 and you are at the liberty of resetting a run whenever things don't go your way so that you can get an optimal time. I, on the other hand, have no experience speedrunning DMC5. Instead, I'll be relying on my general knowledge of the game. This means that I won't be resetting to get an optimal time, as I have a hard cap of 2 hours that I need to stick to, regardless of whether or not things are going my way. We'll be tackling the Devil Hunter difficulty, which is the equivalent of normal, and of course, we'll be doing it from a fresh new game save. Oh, and those of you watching should probably bring a raincoat. I hear there's a storm approaching. With all that said and done though, I think it's time I stop talking and start playing some DevilNeverCry. Right, I guess it's time to tackle the old rodeo with DMC5 this time around. As you can see, we are playing through the prologue here, of course, and we are playing as none other than Virgil. And this decision, this choice to play as this character, ultimately boils down to two key points here. The first of which is that I played as Dante and Nero in the previous video, tackling DMC4, and so I wanted some variety, thus we are playing as Virgil. The second point, of course, is that ultimately I feel that this is the character that will get me through this challenge the fastest. I need every advantage I can get for this run, and if the final time is anything to go by, I definitely made the right choice by sticking with Virgil. That's all I'll say on that matter. I don't want to spoil things. But thus, we start this run. We'll be blitzing our way through the prologue, and the boss at the end of this is not going to be a challenge at all. In fact, we're going to stand there and die as quickly as possible, as that is the quickest way of ending this mission. With that death out of the way, we move on to mission 1, where we're able to finally customize Virgil. I pick up the speed ability, which basically just allows us to sprint everywhere, which, surprise surprise, is vital to a speedrun, I guess. And we're going to pick up Rapid Slash, just as a way to quickly move around the battlefield without teleporting. We actually do the very first encounter of mission 1 despite it being entirely optional, and that's simply because I need to build my stylish points. I want to get an S rank at the end of as many missions as possible because I want the orb bonus that they provide. These are the orbs I use to buy moves and health upgrades and devil trigger upgrades, and so if I want to have a fully kitted out Virgil that is an absolute menace to the Demon Society, I'm going to need these S ranks. We subsequently skip the rest of the encounters, including those pesky hentai tentacles, and then we come to the boss fight. It is then at this point you see me employ the use of a strategy that will get me through the rest of this game with relative ease. The strategy, of course, being chained judgment cuts. Combine that with the doppelganger to literally damage the amount of judgment cuts there are, and this boss's health melts. What's great about this move is that it auto-targets. It means you don't need to lock onto enemies. If you want, you can simply turn the camera away to pacify enemies, and then judgment cut them to your heart's content. And provided you have doppelganger active or your Sin Devil trigger, it is one of the quickest ways to clear a room full of enemies or even a boss. With that, we move on to mission 2. We pick up the Rising Star ability for the Yamato, and then we move on to the mission itself. We move through the streets of Redgrave before coming across a forced encounter. These Impusa enemies have no health at all, so they go down without a fight. And then less than a minute later, as we dodge even more hentai tentacles, we come across the Hell Caners. They lumber around, dragging those unwieldy scythes, and they too go down just like the Impusers, without a fight. As we enter the hotel, we pick up a Nidhogg hatchling before putting it into a fleshy orifice. Gone are the days of simply using a key to open a door. We manage to escape the clutches of the hotel eventually, before coming across the Antenora enemies. These are the ones that murder charge you the moment you knock them off their feet. Of course, their misguided rage results in them dying, and then it's on to the Goliath boss fight. Much like the previous boss though, the chain judgment cuts cut them down to size. As we start mission 3, we pick up a whole host of upgrades for our summoned swords, or Mirage Blades as they're known in this game, and 3 blue orbs to upgrade our health. Virgil makes light work of the encounters across the rooftops and then finds his way into the sewers. We end up bursting a whole set of demon capillaries to open up a path, and then we find ourselves in the library, along with a set of death scissors. We end up destroying them with a cascade of sword swings, no doubt thinking of Nello Angelo along the way, before we encounter Artemis. And just like the previous bosses, the judgment cuts lay her to rest. This move is incredibly powerful on enemies that love to move around out of your normal attack range, as the judgment cuts are unescapable. At the start of mission 4, we pick up the Beast Uppercut and Rising Dragon moves for Beowulf. I'm just laying the groundwork at the moment to eventually buy the Dragon Breaker move, which is one of Virgil's most powerful. This mission begins with a few forced encounters, which we quickly dispatch of, before allowing us to skip the next one as we sprint over a bridge. As we work our way across the winding streets of Redgrave, looking at the beautiful graffiti as we go, we finally come across the Nidhogg boss. As this is a boss that loves to sit outside of your melee range for an extended period of time, the judgment cuts here work quite well. You don't even have to take out the tertiary tentacles, you can simply just target the main boss and he'll go down quite quickly. At the start of mission 5, we pick up 3 purple orbs to increase our Devil Trigger bar, and we pick up the Heavy Rain Mirage Blade ability. This ability allows us to freeze an enemy for an extended period of time with our projectile swords, allowing us to use risky moves with big startup to pull off maximum damage with relative safety. We start off this mission in a set of sewers before finally moving into a warehouse, which, surprisingly, has some very well-placed explodable barrels. After blowing our enemies to smithereens with these barrels and making our way back to the surface, it's time to take on the Elder Gedeon Knight boss fight. The main challenge of this boss fight is the horse. It has the ability to control time, and as such, it loves to throw out a set of projectiles which slow you down. It does its best efforts to run around the arena and keep out of melee range, but nothing is going to escape the power of our judgment cuts. And that brings us on to mission 6. I'm not gonna lie, this boss fight was incredibly annoying, particularly because every time I got up on its back, a random projectile would throw me to the ground. As such, it took me far longer than needed, despite us getting the S rank. We kick off mission 7 by finally purchasing the Dragon Breaker ability, knowing full well we'll have to use it at the end of this mission. We're tasked with traversing through the subway, which suspiciously looks like London, before being introduced to the enemy spawner mechanic. These fleshy, pulsating mounds essentially spawn enemies if you don't kill them before they do. They're great for farming orbs and style points, but terrible if you're trying to get through things quickly. As such, we prioritize with getting them down first. After hopping some trains and riding some escalators, we finally make our way to the surface. We starfall down a giant ramp before entering a theater and fighting a set of knights. The Scudo Angelos and their shields can be quite a pain to take out with the judgment cuts, so we go in there and do things the old-fashioned way, before finally being left with the Proto-Angelo. The game actually classes this particular Proto-Angelo as a mini-boss, and as such has given it an extreme health pool. Despite that, we set him up with a couple of heavy rain swords to freeze him, and charge up some level 3 dragon breakers to silence him for good. Moving on to mission 8, we finally pick up the enemy step or jump cancel ability. A great overall ability to have, but we won't be using it as much as we did in the DMC3 video. We're back inside the Clyfoth tree for this mission, and it's going to be a long one. There's several encounters here that we're forced into, as well as ones that we can skip, provided that we run out of the arena quick enough. This is also the mission where we get introduced to the magic-wielding goats. Sounds hilarious, but they can be quite lethal. And after an arduous journey, we finally make it back to Urizen's throne room. This time around though, we're going to go in for the kill. We teleport into his vicinity immediately and begin to spam the Lunar Phase move with Beowulf. It does wonders for breaking his shield, and then we're on to the next phase. In the second phase, all we do is stand still and proceed to die, as this, again, is the quickest way to end the mission. Of course, it goes without saying, you have to wait for Urizen to stand before you're able to die, otherwise you'll have to redo the boss fight. At the start of Mission 9, we end up picking up Yamato's Aerial Rave B, the roulette move which gives Virgil some extra height. We're going to need this for Mission 12, but more on that later. Mission 9 introduces us to the Behemoth, a writhing mass of demon flesh which has a giant health pool and can be quite a pain to take down. During another forced encounter with two Proto-Angelos, I'm able to hit both of them with one level 3 Dragon Breaker, killing them almost instantly. We proceed to dive kick off a ledge for what feels like an eternity, raid a couple of coffins, then we come into our first encounter with multiple nobodies, enemies that return from DMC1, except this time they've got a few new tricks up their sleeve, one of which being the ability to summon more nobodies. Again, great for farming orbs or style points, but absolutely terrible for trying to beat this as fast as we can. Moving on to Mission 10, we buy our very first super move, the Judgment Cut End. I arguably should have bought this sooner, but hey, you live and learn, right? We tread some familiar ground in Mission 10 before being introduced to the Chaos enemies, the embodiment of Spin to Win. We also take down a few Hellbats, enemies taken from DMC2 that have been given some sort of super demon steroid that causes them to explode upon death. And before you know it, we're back in Urizen's throne room. All we have to do this time is break his shield and the mission automatically ends. And with Mission 10 over and done with, we are officially at the midway point of DMC5. It's taken us an hour and 10 minutes to get here, which doesn't bode well for getting this done in under 2 hours. At this point, I will admit, I definitely was sweating a little bit, because things were taking far longer than I thought they would. It's too early to count ourselves out of this race though, so we're going to pick up Hell on Earth and we're going to move on to Mission 11. This mission is fairly straightforward. There's only a couple of forced encounters and one puzzle we have to do, which luckily doesn't take long at all. We're finally introduced to the Hell Judeca, which is another enemy that can spawn other enemies, but also loves to teleport when you get too close. Thankfully, we prevented them from spawning any enemies, and we eventually make our way to the Cavaliere Angelo boss fight, or Cavalier as people like to call him. Taking down this boss with Virgil is very straightforward, and we don't need to use any of our super moves. We can simply freeze him with our Mirage Blades, and hit him with a level 3 Dragon Breaker to drain his health. We hit him with a total of 3 Dragon Breakers before he bites the dust. And that brings us on to Mission 12, a make or break mission for us. We don't have a lot of time left, and essentially we're playing catch up here. If I'm able to do the skips that I know how to do for this mission, this should take us no time at all, and keep us on track for maybe finishing this under 2 hours. You see, Mission 12 tasks you with opening up a very specific door. To open this door, there are 3 separate switches scattered around the environment that we need to hit to open this door. The main issue, of course, is there's going to be a lot of traversal and forced enemy encounters involved for me to hit all 3 switches. However, provided I'm able to platform this correctly, and by correctly I mean in a way that the devs definitely didn't intend to, I should be able to bypass all of the forced encounters and traversal and open that door up relatively quickly. The main risk associated with this, of course, is that I could fall at any moment and negate any of the time I've saved by using this method. Thankfully though, I'm able to complete this section without falling, and we move on to the Urizen boss fight. Like the Cavaliere boss, we're able to hit him with a heavy rain to freeze him, and then smack him up with the level 3 Dragon Breaker. Things begin to take a turn for the worse though when I just stop dodging. I grow impatient and try and damage race the boss, and it almost results in me dying. Thankfully though, I'm able to get through this one by the skin of my teeth. Thankfully, Mission 13 is a relatively quick mission, where we don't have to fight the majority of the encounters. We can simply just break items in the environment to open up the doors and progress on. Moving on to Mission 14, we pick up the Deep Stinger for the Mirage Edge. Though looking back, I don't think I end up ever using this move. This was supposed to be a cinematic mission where V stumbles around into a boss rush, but for us, we're simply going to teleport across. It's more of a mini boss rush than anything, and they're actually weaker versions of their usual selves, which means that they go down quite quickly. And with the bosses down, there's nothing left for us to do other than to zip across the environment with these well-placed teleportation lanterns, and then we move on to Mission 15. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is one of those missions where I don't really know the most optimal path to get through this as quickly as possible. As such, we go in pretty much shooting blind. There's tons of verticality to this mission, a lot of environmental traps, and there's even a section dedicated to skateboarding on Nero's punchline arm. Nevertheless, we fumble our way through, defeat the handful of forced encounters before tackling Malthus. This is literally another boss that can't stay still, but it doesn't matter. Virgil's judgment cut end will find you no matter where you are. And we end up putting down this chicken so fast, I'm sure Colonel Sanders himself will be proud. We kick off mission 16 with less than 22 minutes left on the clock. I'll have to beat 5 missions, with this mission included, if I want to get this done in under 2 hours. And at this point, I'm not gonna lie, I did think this entire run was just scuffed, and I was contemplating whether or not I should just even continue. Whether it was due to believing in the heart of the cards or just out of pure spite, I ended up continuing this run anyway. We spent most of this mission falling off platforms and into enemy encounters. Thankfully, there was an overabundance of white orbs scattered around, which meant that my devil trigger was always stocked up at maximum. This meant that any of the forced encounters I found myself in went by pretty fast, and it wasn't long before hell itself began to freeze over and we entered the boss fight with King Cerberus. And if I'm honest, this boss fight couldn't have gone down any better. We ended up stunning the boss with a barrage of judgment cuts before freezing it with our heavy rain of mirage blades. This allowed us to get off not only a judgment cut end, but also a hell on earth to take out over 2/3 of its health bar. At that point, we again resumed with a barrage of judgment cuts, and before long, this boss was put down. That right there was definitely some textbook demon killing. Well, at least if you're Virgil, that is. Mission 17 was another mission where things almost went wrong. Again, I ended up damage racing the boss and almost dying for it. Thankfully, my combo meal of chain judgment cuts and lunar phase spam absolutely buried this boss, allowing us to progress on to mission 18. With 14 minutes left on the clock, this was another mission that I absolutely had to nail. There was no room for error here. Thankfully, Griffin and Shadow were very susceptible to judgment cuts, and it sent them into their shell phase quite quickly, quite often. There's only 3 forced encounters in mission 18 before the Nightmare boss. We have Griffin, Shadow, Griffin and Shadow, and then we have Nightmare himself. The first half of the Nightmare boss fight went fairly well until Nightmare decided to disappear and go on vacation. I ended up taking out Griffin and Shadow simply because I wanted to vent my frustration before Nightmare finally came back, allowing us to, once again, melt his health bar with more judgment cuts. And with just 9 minutes left on the clock, we proceed into the final 2 missions of DMC 5, the Dante duology. I'm not gonna lie, it has been a substantial amount of time since I faced off against Dante with Virgil, so it took me a little while to fall back into my usual routine. Dante managed to get some good hits in against us, but was not able to overcome the insurmountable might, of course, of our Mirage Blades and Judgment Cuts. Dante pulls his Devil Trigger in an attempt to cope with the bukkake of blades being thrown his way, but all is too late as Virgil prevails, allowing us to move on to Mission 20, the final mission of Devil May Cry 5. Now, for those of you that haven't faced Mission 20 Dante, this dude is an entirely different beast in and of himself. The hyper armor properties for most of his moves are through the roof. There's basically nigh on nothing that can stun this dude once he starts a combo chain. It's ridiculous. Knowing this boss was going to be a pain in the ass and that time was of the essence, this is where I come in with the Galaxy Brain strategy. You'll notice that in the previous few missions, I haven't bought anything and I've been stockpiling red orbs. That, of course, is for one very specific reason. Whenever you die in Devil May Cry 5, the game gives you 3 different options. The first of which is to give up and restart at a checkpoint. The second option is to use a consumable, a gold orb, to resurrect you. And the third is to use your red orbs to resurrect you. Depending on how many red orbs you use, your resurrection will have different outcomes. But if you go for the most expensive resurrect option, not only do you resurrect with full life and full Devil Trigger, but you also do substantial damage to any enemies that are in that room with you. So we let Dante think he's won and kill us. As he's standing there gloating, we resurrect, and take off over 50% of his health, letting the game do the majority of the work for us. As Dante's flung back, cheeks thoroughly clapped, we decide to enact our revenge. We pop our Sin Devil Trigger and enact Hell on Earth. Dante, still reeling from what just happened to him, spirit thoroughly broken, decides to walk face first into our hell on earth. And before he can say anything else, we chain it into a judgment cut end, which is rather fitting thematically, as that leads to the end of the boss fight. As we skip past the credit sequence and the final mission results screen comes up, we come to the end of our run, having bested Devil May Cry 5 in 1 hour, 54 minutes and 6 seconds. Well, there you have it. Though it was close, another Devil May Cry has been bested. Not that there was any doubt, of course. Before we go any further, I do want to say a big thank you to those of you who are still here. Thank you for sticking with me to the very end of this run. And of course, if you are still watching, still listening, I want you to put DMC Reboot in the comment section of this video. And if enough of you do so, we'll be tackling the reboot next. Before we get sidetracked any further though, DMC5 has been beaten in under 2 hours, and we are well within our right to request a refund. That's it. We're not playing on PC, are we? We're playing on console. I keep forgetting this keeps happening. If you enjoyed today's video, do be sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. Not only does it help the channel out a ton with the algorithm, it also means you won't miss out on the next installment. With all that said and done though, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next video.